Many people believe that speed erases mistakes, that accelerating hard enough makes the past look small in the rearview mirror. But it doesn't. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and comment below. Where are you watching from now? This story will accompany you to the end of the road. That night, the engine had been running longer than necessary. Not because it was overheating, because of hesitation. Ethan kept his hands on the steering wheel, his fingers tense, feeling the car's vibration pass through his body. The dashboard illuminated his face in pale blue, highlighting dark circles that no victory had managed to erase. The abandoned warehouse was almost empty. 3 cars, 3 men, heavy silence, no music, no shouted bets. This wasn't entertainment. It was a debt. "You're late," said Mark, leaning against a black Charger, arms crossed. "I know," replied Ethan, without taking his eyes off the makeshift track ahead. Mark didn't trust words. He trusted results. And Ethan's last result had been too big a problem to ignore. The road ahead didn't appear on maps. An unfinished stretch of highway, surrounded by bushes and broken posts. Poorly marked curves. Perfect for someone who didn't intend to return in one piece. "Same rules," Mark said. "Whoever goes off the road goes out of the game." Ethan nodded. He knew that stretch. Not from the asphalt, from memory. 3 years earlier, someone hadn't returned there. And since then, each race carried a weight that no trophy could balance. The cars lined up. The wind cut through the silence. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Not to pray. To remember who he was before confusing escape with courage. The signal was given. The engines roared. Ethan's car shot forward, pushing him against the seat. The speed climbed too quickly. The lights stretched ahead. The world turned into a tunnel. But something was different. This time, he wasn't racing to make money, nor to impress, nor to forget. He was racing because someone wanted him to keep racing forever. And at that exact moment, Ethan realized, not every trap looks like a prison. The speedometer climbed, as if ignoring any human limit. Ethan felt every irregularity in the asphalt pierce the steering wheel and hit his arms directly. The unfinished road seemed to move beneath the tires, alive, unstable, ready to swallow any mistake. The other 2 cars were right behind. Not glued, pressing. They kept a calculated distance, like hunters who know that their prey will stumble sooner or later. The radio crackled. "Don't hold back," said Mark's cold voice. "This road demands fear." Ethan didn't answer. If he opened his mouth, the past would escape. The first sharp curve appeared without warning. He slowed down only as much as necessary. The car skidded. He corrected. He obeyed. Years ago, he would have accelerated even more. Today, he calculated. Not out of prudence, for survival. In the mirrors, the headlights distorted. One of the cars almost went straight through the curve, kicking up dust. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. This could end badly too quickly. Further ahead, the road narrowed. Knocked-down cones, crooked signs, no margin for error. The kind of stretch that separates courage from illusion. The memory returned uninvited. Another night, another race, another car, the impact, the silence afterward. Ethan blinked hard, bringing his focus back. The difference between the past and now was simple. Today, he was aware of the risk. Before, he used speed to pretend he didn't care. The radio crackled again. "You're slower," Mark teased. "No, I'm more alive," Ethan murmured, though the radio was already off. The final stretch was approaching. A short straight before a long, blind curve. After that, the asphalt ended. Literally. A poorly marked drop-off, known to few. The race didn't end with a line. It ended with luck. The car behind tried to overtake on the right too aggressively. Ethan held his line. He didn't react. He didn't fight. The other driver pushed hard and almost lost control. That's when Ethan understood. The race wasn't about winning. It was about seeing who made the first mistake. He entered the long curve, feeling the car float for an eternity. He adjusted with minimal precision. He came out unscathed. Behind him, a dry rumble. Ethan didn't look back. Not out of coldness. By choice. He crossed the final stretch and slowed down, parking a few meters later. Silence fell heavily once more. Only the engine, cooling down, creaked like tired metal. Mark arrived last. He got out of the car slowly. "You're different," he said, observing Ethan. "Maybe I just stopped lying," he replied. Mark smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Lies are useful. Truths break systems. Ethan felt the weight of the sentence. This wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. The warehouse was hidden behind an old, disused railway yard, surrounded by rusty chains and ancient silences. It didn't appear on maps. It didn't need to. Whoever arrived, there was already part of the circuit. Ethan parked and turned off the engine with excessive care, as if the car could betray his thoughts. Mark got in right behind him, followed by two men who didn't exchange glances with anyone. They weren't drivers. They were debt collectors. The smell of burnt oil mixed with that of stale coffee. The white light hanging from the ceiling flickered, creating shadows that seemed to move on their own. "You rigged the race," said one of the men, without raising his voice. "I won without hurting anyone," replied Ethan. "That wasn't the deal." Mark crossed his arms, observing in silence. He knew. He always had known. That kind of race wasn't just for betting. It was for testing limits, for selecting who was willing to go too far. The road ended sooner than expected, Ethan said, carefully weighing each word. The man smiled slightly. "The road ends when we decide it does." Ethan felt an old chill run down his spine. The same chill he'd felt years ago when he'd sped through the rain, thinking control was synonymous with courage. He thought of Clara, not the Clara who smiled in the old photos, but the Clara standing by the side of the road that distant night. The image had never left him. He'd sped up to avoid hearing his own name being shouted. The second man stepped forward. "You owe favors," he said. "I paid them all," Ethan replied. "You paid money. You didn't pay for choices." Silence. Mark finally spoke. "He's still useful. He just doesn't want to drive like he used to." The first man tilted his head. "That's exactly the problem. Those who slow down start seeing too much." Ethan realized in that instant that leaving wasn't a simple option. It wasn't enough to stop racing. He needed to sever the bond. And bonds in that world weren't broken. They were replaced. "Last race," the man said. "After that," Ethan asked. "After that, you disappear." A lie, but a lie big enough to seduce. The challenge wasn't speed. It was transportation. A borrowed car. A short route. Nothing too illegal, at least on the surface. No detours. No curiosity. No personal choices, he added. Ethan nodded, knowing that each word carried an unspoken warning. As he left the warehouse, the night air seemed heavier, as if the city knew something was about to happen. Mark walked beside him for a few meters. "You're trying to redeem yourself," he said. "No," Ethan replied. "I'm trying to stop lying to myself." Mark chuckled softly. "This usually turns out to be expensive." Ethan got into the car and started the engine. The sound didn't bring euphoria. It brought responsibility. For the first time, he knew. The next race wasn't about arriving first. It was about returning in one piece, and finally deciding if he still wanted to run. The car wasn't his. Ethan realized this the instant he closed the door. The seat was adjusted for someone taller, the steering wheel slightly tilted to the right, as if the vehicle already had memories of other hands. There were no marks, no identity, just cold metal and functional silence. The instruction had been simple. Pick up the cargo, follow the route, don't open the trunk. Rules that were too simple always hid something. He drove through almost empty industrial streets, where the lampposts were flickering and the buildings seemed to observe in silence. Nothing on the route seemed truly dangerous. This made him uneasy. Roads that were too empty always meant that someone had paid to keep them that way. The makeshift GPS blinked green. No street names, just coordinates. Ethan drove in silence, feeling the car respond with excessive precision. This vehicle had been prepared for more than just speed. At a dimly lit intersection, the radio, which he didn't remember turning on, activated. The radio crackled once before an unfamiliar voice filled the car's interior. "Stay on course. Don't slow down before the destination." Ethan felt his stomach clench. There was no name, no human inflection. It sounded like an instruction programmed not to be questioned. He kept his foot firmly on the gas pedal. The dashboard showed everything normal, too fast, too quiet. The city seemed to recede as he moved forward. Warehouses gave way to empty lots. Then, nothing but cracked concrete and crooked fences. The kind of place where rules don't survive. Then the car vibrated slightly. Not like a mechanical defect, like a weight shifting. The trunk. Ethan felt the immediate urge to brake. He didn't. He remembered the words, "Don't open it." He'd always been good at following instructions when they kept him alive. But something slammed shut from inside. Dry. Too human. The steering wheel almost slipped from his hands. He took a deep breath, tried to convince himself it was just loose cargo. Still, he adjusted the rearview mirror. Useless. The glass was dark, opaque, deliberately blinding. "Keep going," said the voice on the radio, as if it had read his thoughts. "What am I transporting?" Ethan asked, knowing it might be a mistake. Silence. Then, "You're paying what you owe." The GPS indicated an improvised exit, a narrow access leading under an abandoned viaduct. There, only a solitary shed, illuminated by 2 tired spotlights. Ethan stopped the car. The engine died. The silence fell too heavily. Before he could get out, the trunk was open from the outside. He got out of the car with his hands visible. The man who appeared wasn't in a hurry. He had the look of someone who didn't need to rush. Behind him, another man opened the rear compartment completely. There were no people tied up. There were no bodies. There was a sealed metal safe, bearing the symbol of a company Ethan knew all too well. His old company. "You helped hide this years ago," the man said. "You didn't know the contents, but you chose to speed." The ground seemed to shift beneath Ethan's feet. This was buried when everything else collapsed. The other continued. Data. Evidence. Names. Ethan understood at once. This cargo wasn't payment. It was a test. "Why me?" he asked, his voice low. The man smiled humorlessly. "Because those who flee too fast usually know exactly where they're running from." The radio crackled again, now with Mark's voice. "You can hand it over, or you can open it, but only one of those choices will return you whole." Ethan looked at the safe, then at the empty road behind him. For the first time in years, there wasn't enough speed to escape what was coming next, and that terrified him. The safe seemed larger now that it was out of the car, or perhaps it was the weight of what it represented. Ethan knelt before it, feeling the cold metal pierce the fabric of his trousers. There was a numeric keypad, old, almost outdated. No brand, no name, just the silent demand for a decision. "You have a minute," the man said. Mark didn't appear. His absence weighed more than his voice. Ethan ran a hand over his face. He knew exactly what was inside. Names that shouldn't exist on paper. Hidden payments. Races financed by companies that publicly preached order and ethics. He had been useful, not essential, but close enough, and he had accelerated when he should have stopped. The code. He remembered, not from memory, but from guilt. It was the number of the day everything went wrong. His fingers trembled. "Open it," insisted the voice on the radio low. "If you want to get out of the game, get out whole." The other man watched silently, his hand near his coat. Ethan typed. The metallic click sounded too loud. The lid opened slowly, as if resisting its own exposure. Inside, there was no money. Only disks, flash drives, laminated documents, all organized with obsessive care. The truth kept for years, waiting for someone with enough courage, or nothing left to lose. "Take it," the man said. "The agreement has changed." "How has it changed?" "You decide its fate." Ethan stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. It wasn't freedom. It was total responsibility. "If I hand it over, you stay alive," the man finished. "And if I don't hand it over, you become a problem." Simple, cruel, honest. Ethan closed the safe. The sound echoed under the overpass like a period. "Then I'm a problem," he said. The silence stretched dangerously. The radio crackled with static. "Are you sure?" Mark asked, now without irony. "No," Ethan replied. "But for the first time, it's my choice." He placed the safe in the back seat. He didn't run. He didn't rush. He got into the car, like someone accepting the weight of what he carries. The men didn't stop him. They just watched, as if that decision were more effective than any threat. The GPS changed automatically. New destination. This time, a name appeared. Ethan felt his heart beat with controlled force. The car moved forward into the night, no longer as an escape, but as a crossing. He knew that, at dawn, nothing would be the same. The faces, the names, the system. Everything could crumble. But there, in that dark part of the city, Ethan finally understood. Not every road is made for running. Some exist to make you stop and take responsibility. The sky was beginning to lighten when Ethan realized he wasn't alone. Two headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, distant, too constant to be a coincidence. He didn't accelerate. He maintained the exact speed limit. In that world, that was a warning. The GPS indicated an abandoned administrative building on the edge of the city. It had once been the headquarters of a construction company involved in major public works. Today, just another forgotten concrete skeleton, officially. The car vibrated slightly as it stopped. The safe in the back seat seemed to watch, even without eyes. Ethan got out and entered the building. The interior smelled of dust and old paper. Emergency lights flickered faintly in the hallways. Someone had prepared the place. It wasn't an improvised plan. In the main hall, a woman awaited him. Dark suit, firm posture, uncurious gaze. "You took your time," she said. "I didn't know if I was coming," Ethan replied. "But you came. That says a lot." She introduced herself only as Laura. She didn't say where she came from, nor who she represented. She didn't need to. People like her only appear when the system decides to protect itself or reinvent itself. "What you carry could bring down a lot of people," she said. But could be buried again," Ethan retorted. Laura nodded. "The difference now is that you exist." He placed the safe on the metal table. The impact echoed through the empty hall. Laura didn't open it. "Do you understand what happens next?" "No one runs free anymore," Ethan replied. "Not even you." He took a deep breath. For the first time, it didn't sound like a threat. "I'm tired of running," he said, "but I don't know how to walk slowly." Laura almost smiled, then learned to stay. Outside, tires screeched too loudly. One of the vehicles that had followed him stopped abruptly. Voices. Orders. Ethan walked to the window and saw men he knew all too well arguing with others he had never seen. The game had spilled over. "Does Mark know?" Ethan asked. "He's known from the beginning," Laura replied. "Some players helped dismantle the board. Others bet until the end." A dry thud echoed in the parking lot. A shot fired into the air. "Just a warning." Laura closed the safe with a final click. "You did your part. Now decide what to do with the rest of your life." Ethan watched the outside scene dissolve into tense negotiations and calculated retreats. Nothing cinematic. Nothing clean. The world was just slowly rearranging itself. He didn't feel victory, nor complete relief. But he felt something new. Presence. He was there, in the exact place where his choices had finally caught up with him. And for the first time, he didn't feel like starting the car. Mark appeared when the parking lot was almost empty. He didn't come running. He brought no visible threats. Mark walked as if he had already accepted the outcome before even arriving. His coat thrown over his shoulder, his face marked by too many sleepless nights, but his eyes still assessed everything. Mark stopped a few meters from Ethan. There were no spectators, no engines running, no loud music to mask the silences. Only the distant sound of the city waking up. "I warned you," Mark said, finally. "Warned you about what?" Ethan asked. "That slowing down was more dangerous than speeding up." Ethan held his gaze. "You confused danger with control," he replied. "They're not the same thing." Mark let out a short, humorless laugh. "Control is all we have. Without it, what's left? Guilt? Remorse? The truth is left," Ethan said, "and doesn't need to run." Mark ran a hand over his face. For a second, the mask slipped. "You think I didn't think about stopping?" "I think you did," Ethan replied. "But you were afraid to stand still with yourself." The words hit harder than any punch. Mark turned his back, walked a few steps, then stopped. "You know what happens to me now," he said, without turning around. "I know. And you accept it?" Ethan took a deep breath. Accepting wasn't the right verb, but running away wasn't an option anymore either. "I accept that everyone pays the way they can." Silence settled in again. Heavy, definitive. Distant sirens echoed through the industrial area. They weren't sprinting. They were moving at the precise pace of someone who knows that time is now on their side. Mark smiled slightly. Funny. What? We spent years betting everything on seconds. And now we're slowly losing everything. He turned around one last time. You won this race, he said. No, Ethan corrected. I just stopped running. Mark nodded, as if finally understanding a foreign language that had always been there. Without drama, without long goodbyes, he walked away towards the approaching lights. There were no visible handcuffs, no resistance. Just the consequence following its natural course. Ethan remained where he was. He felt a strange emptiness, but it wasn't loss. It was space. Space for something he never had time to build while he lived rushing. Laura appeared beside him, silently. This doesn't absolve you, she said. I know, but it allows you to continue. Ethan looked at the empty parking lot, then at the road beyond the buildings. For the first time, it didn't seem like an invitation. It just seemed like a path. What happens now, he asked. Now, Laura replied. You learn to live without using speed as an excuse. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the sun was already touching the asphalt, dissolving the shadows of the night. He still didn't know what the future would be like. He didn't know when he would be free from it all. But, for the first time, he knew exactly where he was. And that was enough for now. The following days were free of chases, roaring engines, or sirens blaring through the night. They were filled with something harder to bear, routine. Ethan was instructed to remain in the city, not as a formal prison, as an observation. A small apartment, too furnished to be comfortable and too impersonal to feel like home. The keys arrived without explanation. The rules, too. No racing. The silence of the apartment was deafening. Without the engine's rumble, Ethan began to hear things he had always suppressed. The distant hum of the city, his own footsteps, his irregular breathing when memory decided to appear unannounced. He woke up early out of habit, not necessity. His body still craved adrenaline. His hands clenched in the void, as if searching for the steering wheel. But all that was there was a simple table, a window that was too large, and coffee that cooled quickly. Laura appeared occasionally. She never announced her arrival. She always brought short questions. Have you ever thought about running away? Every day. And why don't you run away? Ethan hesitated to answer. Because now I know what happens next. She nodded, jotted down something invisible, and left. At night, Ethan walked through the city. Without haste. Without a destination. He observed ordinary people doing things that had always seemed impossible to him. Waiting without irritation, walking without urgency, stopping without guilt. Once he stopped at an intersection. The traffic light was red. No cars in sight. Years ago, he would have gone ahead without hesitation. Now he stood there, waiting. The light turned green. He crossed. The simple gesture left him inexplicably exhausted. The memories persisted. Clara appeared not as sharp pain, but as a constant presence. No longer the scream, nor the impact, only the look that asked why. This question had no quick answer. Perhaps it never would. Ethan began to write. Not reports. No formal confessions. Just fragments. What he felt. What he avoided. What still hurt. It was strange to realize that putting words on paper was harder than any high-speed turn. One afternoon, he found an abandoned communal garage in the neighborhood. No fast cars, just old tools and people fixing what could still be salvaged. He started helping, first silently, then with questions, then with hands dirty with grease. There, nobody knew who he had been. Nobody asked. Each piece fitted into place, seemed like a small agreement with the present. One night, Laura called. The process will move forward, she said. And then, you decide who you will be when nobody is looking. Ethan hung up the phone and sat on the floor of the empty garage. For the first time, he didn't feel afraid of time passing. He felt respect. He wasn't free yet. He wasn't at peace yet. But he was learning something he had never mastered while racing at 200 kilometers per hour. Some reconstructions only happen when you accept going slowly. The auditorium was smaller than Ethan had imagined. There were no ostentatious cameras, no audience eager for spectacle, just a few rows occupied by people who knew exactly why they were there. Lawyers, investigators, Two faces he recognized, former sponsors in disguise, now seemed smaller, sitting in those hard chairs. No logos, no contracts, no speed to protect them. Ethan sat at the simple table in the center of the auditorium. No flashy microphone, just a recorder running and an attentive gaze from the other side. "You can start when you're ready," said the woman in front of him. He took a deep breath. There was no prepared speech, no impactful phrase. All he had were memories that hurt less than before, but still hurt. "I was useful," he began. "Not essential, not brilliant, just useful." A few people exchanged glances. That wasn't the narrative they expected. "I accepted money because it was easy. I raced because it made me feel invincible. And I kept quiet because I thought stopping would be worse than continuing to make mistakes." One of the men interrupted. "Did you know the consequences?" Ethan didn't look away. "I pretended I didn't. But I knew." The silence that followed wasn't accusatory. It was dense, honest. He spoke of the schemes, the financed races, the companies that laundered their image while buying risk. He spoke slowly, without embellishment. Each word seemed to tear away a piece of a past he no longer needed to hide. When he finished, he felt something unexpected. Not relief. Clean exhaustion. "You understand that this doesn't erase anything," the woman said. "I didn't come to erase anything," he replied. "I came to stop running." From the back of the auditorium, someone stood up, an older man with a tired look. "My brother died in one of those rush construction projects," he said. Ethan felt the impact like a dry shock. "I can't give back what you lost," he replied, his voice low. "But I won't pretend I had no part in it." The man nodded slowly and sat down. There was no forgiveness. There needed to be. Leaving the auditorium, the world seemed the same. Cars passing by, people rushing by, the city functioning. But for Ethan, something had definitively shifted. Laura was waiting for him outside. "This will spread," she said. "I know. You lose your anonymity." Ethan looked at the street, at a traffic light turning red. People waiting. "I've lived too fast already," he replied. "If I have to be seen now, so be it." Laura watched for a moment and nodded. "Then you finished the hardest race." Ethan smiled almost imperceptibly. "No." He took a deep breath. "I just reached the point where stopping ceased to be scary." And as he walked along the ordinary sidewalk, without chases, without roaring engines, Ethan understood. Being seen sometimes is the last stretch of the road. The days following the deposition weren't noisy. They were dangerously silent. No direct threats, no explicit warnings. Just a constant feeling that something was watching from a distance, waiting for the right moment to reappear. Ethan felt this for the first time when he found an envelope slipped under the apartment door. No return address, no stamp. Inside, just an electronic key and an address. He recognized the place immediately. A disused racetrack on the outskirts of the city, where it had all begun, where he had learned that speed could buy respect, or pretend to buy it. Laura answered the phone on the first ring. "Don't go," she said bluntly. "They still exist," Ethan replied. "They want to test if you've changed." He looked at the key in his palm. It was tempting not for access, but for familiarity. "Maybe I need to prove this to myself," he said. Silence on the other end. "So, go knowing there will be no protection." The racetrack seemed even larger empty. Broken grandstands, faded lines. The old smell of rubber and oil still lingered in the air, like a memory that refused to fade. In the center of the track, a single sports car awaited him. Impeccable. The same model he had driven years before. Too polished for that dead place. A man leaning on the hood raised his hand in greeting. It wasn't Mark. It was someone younger, more impatient. "One lap," said the young man. "No cameras, no bets, just to remind you who you are." Ethan approached slowly. The car seemed to breathe with him, as if it knew that this night was not like the others. He opened the door. He sat down. His hands touched the steering wheel reflexively. His whole body recognized the position. A shiver ran down his spine. For a moment, everything was easy again. Fast, comfortable, dangerous. "Are you going to let this die?" the boy provoked. Ethan closed his eyes. He saw Clara. He saw the warehouse. He saw the auditorium. He saw the red light he had learned to respect. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He got out of the car. "This is already dead," he said, putting the key in the seat. "I just took a while to accept it." The boy laughed, incredulous. "You think you won?" "No," Ethan replied. "I think I survived." He walked off the road without looking back. No engine started. No chase ensued. As he reached the rusty gate, the sky began to clear once more. Ethan didn't know what the future held. He didn't know when he would be completely free. But now he also knew how to say no. And that was faster than any car he had ever driven. The news spread slowly, but it didn't stop. Reports emerged without Ethan's name prominently featured, but with enough clues for those who knew where to look. Companies mentioned, contracts reviewed, work suspended. The system creaked like an old engine being forced to slow down. Ethan watched it all from a distance. He wasn't invited for interviews. Nor hailed as a hero. And that was exactly how it should be. Real stories rarely need visible protagonists. They need consequences. Ethan started working in a small workshop far from the city center. No sports cars or tuned engines. They were ordinary vehicles, worn from daily use. Replacing parts, simple adjustments, recurring problems. Honest, predictable work. For the first time, the end of the day didn't depend on beating anyone. Sometimes someone recognized him. A lingering look. A heavy silence. Never accusations. Never applause. Just the discomfort of knowing he existed. Ethan accepted this as part of the price. One morning, he found an envelope on the workshop workbench. Different from the previous one. Plain paper, handwritten. Inside, just one sentence. "Thank you for not speeding." No signature. He carefully folded the paper and put it in his pocket. He didn't need to know who it was from. Laura appeared months later, unannounced, as always. She observed the workshop, the cars lined up, the tools organized. "You could leave," she said. "Start somewhere else." "I know. And why do you stay?" Ethan thought for a moment. "You. Because I don't hide here." Laura nodded. That was enough. She told him that some of the material he had handed over had generated formal investigations. Other parts would never come to light. The world doesn't fix itself all at once. It adjusts, little by little, creaking. "You changed something," she said. "I didn't change everything," Ethan replied. Nobody changes everything. When Laura left, Ethan went back to work. At the end of the day, he closed the workshop and walked to a high point in the city, where he could see the lights turning on one by one. None seemed to rush. They simply existed. He thought of Clara, not with overwhelming guilt, nor with self-indulgence. He thought of her as someone who carries an absence with respect. He would never be innocent. He would never be clean. But he would also no longer be an escape. That night, Ethan understood something simple and definitive. Life doesn't demand that you be fast. She demands your presence. And as he watched the cars pass below, some speeding, others stopping, he knew he no longer needed to prove anything to any road. Because finally, he had learned to stay. It was late afternoon when Ethan closed the workshop for the last time that week. The sky carried shades of orange and gray, and the city seemed to slow down along with the light. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, feeling the simple weight of his own body on the ground. Nothing vibrated, nothing called, and that no longer caused him anxiety. He passed a busy avenue. Cars sped, competed for space, honked. Tense faces behind the windows. He recognized that. It had been him for a long time. He stopped on the sidewalk, not to watch the cars, but to observe himself. He thought of all the times he believed that stopping was losing, that slowing down was a sign of weakness, that running away was the only way to keep breathing. No one had taught him that staying also required courage. He sat on a park bench. His cell phone vibrated once. A short message, and signed. The process has been closed. Nothing more. No explanation. No promise. Ethan turned off his phone and put it away, like someone carefully closing a door. The world went on. Not at his speed. At his speed. A child ran past, laughing, followed by their parents. A dog pulled on its leash, impatient. A couple argued quietly. Everything ordinary. Everything alive. Ethan felt something he had never felt on the tracks. Belonging. He thought of Clara once more. He didn't ask for forgiveness in his thoughts. He didn't try to rewrite the past. He only promised, silently, not to run away anymore from those who needed to be seen. When the sun had completely disappeared, Ethan got up and started walking again. There was no heroic destination, no empty road waiting, just a way home. And that was enough, because he had finally understood something no race had taught him. Some victories don't have applause. Some liberations don't have speed. And some roads weren't made for moving forward, but to make you stop exactly where you need to be. And that night, he realized he wasn't running for money, for fear, or for guilt anymore. He was just living. And for the first time, that didn't seem like a small thing.